And hi again, my name is Kristen. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what Josh spoke about, but also my own personal experience and how those differed, and just considering what the most benefits will be for you in creating your own organization. And I just want to start out by saying, as many of my team members have touched on, this is such important work, especially with young people. We're really changing the face of the food industry and health. And I think currently the food industry and the health industry don't work together. And that's something that we need to change. And it seems obvious, but it's really something that has to come from the ground up. And college students are so involved in every other aspect of life. Why not involve them in this? So I know that I've been speaking with a lot of group leaders recently that are so excited to hear that we're bringing the Pod Network to college campuses. And as Josh said, creating an organization on campus, I honestly feel that it was like creating a nonprofit, and it gave me so many skills and life experience. And I'm just really glad to be able to share that with you all today. So I commend you all for being here in the first place. This is really important. And a little bit about my own experience. So I went to Loyola University in Chicago, and attending the university in the first place got me to become vegan. I'll never forget, I took my first environmental ethics class, and the first subject was animal rights. And I was like, oh my goodness, I need to become a vegan. And since then, I've really gotten so involved. I read the China study, Forks Over Knives, What the Health, all of the above, and I just can't get enough of this information. So anyone that is interested in any part of this, I commend you, and I encourage you to get further involved with us. I think PPC is a very unique organization, and we're doing a lot that could really change the face of the future for this society. So the first slide that I'd like to talk about is really just getting started on your campus, and whether that be just a pod or a pod plus a student organization, I thought it'd be a good visual aid to just break it down into the positives and negatives, and talk a little bit about what challenges you might face, some strategies to get ahead of anything that you might encounter. So of course, creating a pod, one thing that I love, and I've heard from group leaders as a regional manager, is just the sheer easiness, in setting up an original pod and establishing an organization. I think that creating a student organization on campus, as Josh mentioned, being the president of an org, it is wonderful in so many ways, but it is a ton of work, and it takes a lot in the initial stages to set up. So something that PPC does really, really well is makes the process very simple and clear and concise, and it's pretty easy to set up a pod. So I would highly recommend starting out with a pod no matter what, and seeing how that system kind of falls together, seeing which people that you reach out to, if you're able to build that core team, and really using individual skills to the best of your advantage. And then of course, if you feel comfortable and you find that you have people that are well-versed in the school's resources or the rules and regulations, funding opportunities, all of the above, then perhaps pursuing becoming a student organization on campus. So as some of the things on this slide, it's in just being a pod, there's a couple benefits. There's really, really clear direct support from PPC. You'll kind of have everything laid out for you right as you get started. And as this toolkit will do, in addition to all the other toolkits that PPC offers, we're taking out a lot of the middle work, hopefully for you all, as you create these organizations. And it's not as much busy work as if you were starting something on your own. So something really important is that this is not just you, the individual, but this is you with the backup of an entire nationwide network of people just like you that are really fighting this fight and want to do this important work. So we really want to support you in every way possible. And then of course, some of the negatives of just being a pod, you might miss out on certain campus-wide things such as campus-wide communication, if there might be newsletters that go out, or a calendar, or if there's screens around campus that you feel that you're not maybe able to access without having the backup of that student organization. And something that's very important that I've learned is notifying and identifying a mentor or some sort of moderator. Now, that doesn't have to be within your university. It can be really, really helpful, of course, if you're doing campus-wide events, things like that. But something you may miss out on if you don't become a student organization is having that campus faculty connection, that person that might really be able to help you change the growth and the outreach of the organization itself. But besides that, I think it's a great place to start, and there's really not many downsides of just being a pod. And I think also something important to note is there's a lot that can be done with pods throughout each university. Let's say in one state, if you connect 3, 4, or 5 pods, all of a sudden it's not just your pod, but you have hundreds of people potentially that could co-sponsor events, that could cross-advertise for you. So there's wonderful benefits even if you don't become a student organization. And with that, becoming a student org in addition to the pod, of course, you have a little bit more access to, let's say, meeting spaces, event spaces, things like that. You might be able to communicate a little bit easier with the student body. And then in addition, if you're really working to change the actual food on campus and work with a nutritional committee or something like that, might be a little bit easier to partner with them if you are technically a student organization. Now, of course, some negatives as well. I have found, I created a chapter of what's called the Food Recovery Network at Loyola Chicago. And that was all about food recovery and donating surplus food on our campus. And we actually ran into a lot of regulations that we didn't foresee and some limitations because we were a student organization. So it's interesting when you're thinking about things like funding, you may actually come into more kind of like struggle with certain rules that you're trying to get passed. So really look at what you want to do with your pod, where you want to go, what kind of events you want to host. And if you're not, bent on really becoming that student organization, look at the potential benefits that you might actually see without becoming a student org. So it's just something to consider. And of course, the PPC team is here to help you at any time. Josh and I are very much involved still on our campuses, and we'd be happy to answer any of these questions as they come up. So Gina, next slide, please. Okay, so something that you all may be thinking about is how do we attract those vegans on campus? How do we find the random people that maybe have started the plant-based lifestyle but aren't as knowledgeable or are afraid to go and look for events or just don't know where to find them? You know, it can be very overwhelming at these large universities to figure out where exactly we find some of this information. So some important things to consider. You might already be a part of an organization on campus, whether that be formal or informal. For me personally, I was involved in student government at my school, and I was on a volleyball team at the time. And while neither of those things are directly related to plant-based nutrition or vegans necessarily, I kind of started with my friends and I built out from there. And all of a sudden I found people in those small groups that I maybe wouldn't have had identified before. So I highly recommend looking into any groups you're already a part of. Even if it doesn't seem like it may be that much of a connection, you might find individuals that are really there. And something that we're hopefully going to create through this toolkit is just an easy little blurb that you could stand up in class, for example, and read out and present based on the pod network, explaining what we do, what our mission is, and kind of steering the connotation to a really positive light and not focusing necessarily on the negatives, but saying, wow, this is the positive impact of what you could do if we were working towards this. And you might attract more people that may not have even known that they would be interested in the first place. So professors are a great resource. You can kind of ask them if they would send out an email blast. I've done that before, or a newsletter if there's an environmental newsletter, a sustainability newsletter, anything like that. And that might actually help you locate a mentor as well. And something I touched on before, if there's any sort of nutritional or sustainability committee on campus, does one already exist? If not, could you help create one? Could your pod be the liaison between the student body and the improvement of food on campus? That's something that could be a great first topic to talk about with your pod. What can we really do to provide a whole foods, plant-based, no oil meal, or even a meatless Monday, something like that? It's a really good place to start. And in addition to that, there's all sorts of events that happen on college campuses, farmers markets, veg fests. If there's a conference, just wanted to touch on, it may not necessarily be already affiliated with your university, but you could be that first connection. You could be the one that says, hey, let's tie together this biomedical conference with our pod, because a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of the environmental impacts of their food or the scientific aspect of some of these things. So it's an interesting connection there. And then again, just something that's important is building your team and designating clear roles. So, promoting and encouraging people to use their own skills, whether that be writing grants, or maybe if they're a student government member, they're really knowledgeable about the rules of the university. Using all of those to your advantage and empowering young students. I found something really important is identifying those young leaders and building them up and believing in them. And those could be the next president of the university, of the organization, or it could be the next leader of your pod. So it's really focusing on everyone and anyone that's interested in this. And again, PPC has done a great job of putting all of these resources together. I'm excited about the roadmap. I think that is a wonderful place to start, and know that we will do anything we can to develop this process for you and make it easier. And Gina, next slide, please. Perfect. And then just a couple of things. Something that I wish when I started the organization on campus at Loyola was I wish I had someone sit me down and say, these are some of the challenges that you might see arise, and this is a way to get out ahead of them. So some of the things that you might run into as you start to create, whether it be just a pod or a pod plus a student org, is I think that the initial outreach is the most difficult part, and getting people to really not only show up, but keep coming back and get excited, and just really being willing to get involved more than just liking a page or occasionally involving themselves in a conversation, something like that. So something that's important is providing incentives. I think when Josh mentioned tabling or having events, some sort of competition, using some small thing, whether that be coffee or a plant-based snack or something. If you're going to encourage people to follow you on Facebook or like your page on Instagram, whatever it may be, offering them something to say that you're important to this, we want you to come back, and we value your time here. And I think time is a very interesting thing with college students. A lot of us, we kind of check out after about a minute. So one of the things that one of my favorite pieces of advice is use a minute to your best advantage, and have something that not only is empowering and fun, whether that be a game, positive praise, anything like that, but something that will keep them really excited and focused, even if it's a short amount of time that you're getting to speak to them. So one of the pictures you'll see on here, the bottom right, is one of the games that we did for an event at Loyola, and we used food waste statistics to engage people. So they were able to receive cookies if they got some of the statistics right, and we saw people's faces change as they realized how big of an issue it really is, what's going on in both health and food waste right now. And they walked away not only with a cookie, but actually thinking about how they could further change the pace of that issue. So a couple of quick last things is the interesting thing about using the word vegan versus plant-based. I think it's important to think about the positives again, as we've said. So something PPC does well is using this plant-based and plant-pure term as opposed to vegan. Sometimes on college campuses, people hear, oh, it's a vegan club, I don't eat that way, I can't be involved. But it's not just about that. It's about much more than that, and it's about bringing people into the mix that may not know a lot of the information that we've been privy to by reading these wonderful resources. So just always focusing on the positive impact. And then as well as funding, again, like we touched on, the differences in limitations of funding and rules, regulations, it's something that you want to focus on before it becomes a problem. So designating a treasurer, someone on your team that knows the deadlines ahead of time so you don't get closed out. Really just making sure, and of course, if you don't become a student organization, you actually might have a lot more access to funding. So taking advantage of any fundraising opportunities. I know that at Loyola, we table constantly at the farmers market, and you're able to do certain fundraising things if you're not a student organization. So something just to remember there. And then consistent participation is just about bringing people back. Member retention is a huge thing, and engaging people in every meeting, every event, really asking people questions, critical thinking, things like that. We want people to keep coming back and keep getting involved. So that's all I have. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in.